Hi, guys, and welcome to Environmental Breakdown, where we break down the biggest environmental stories and hope that this isn't the last week tonight. I'm Ishita.
And I am Shreya. Join us every fortnight for updates on everything from climate chaos to environmental governance.
Whether you're a curious mind or a dedicated activist, we've got you covered. Because the planet is sending us some serious warning signals, and it's time we started listening.
So, let's dive into the latest headlines shaping our world and our environment this fortnight.
First up, experts suggest that the large scale water contamination, especially at events like the Kumbh Mela, may have triggered the Guillain-Barré syndrome or the GBS outbreaks across India.
So, we made 500 million people bathe in sewage water, and now we are surprised?
The National Green Tribunal isn't. In fact, they just slammed the UP Pollution Control Board with the same accusation. Speaking of accusations, could groundwater extraction be behind Delhi's recent earthquake? Studies suggest that removing too much groundwater weakens rock pressure, making the earth, well, shake.
It sounds like a badly built Jenga tower. Except we're playing with a city.
Meanwhile, Pune is setting records for all the wrong reasons. Emerging as India's Zika hotspot with 125 of the country's 151 cases in 2024.
And it gets worse. Urbanization has driven 8 dragonfly species locally extinct in Pune's Western Ghats.
At this rate, we'll only be left with mosquitoes.
But not just mosquitoes. Leopards are adapting surprisingly well to the city life in central India. So, next time you see a cat outside your window, double check that it isn't, a big cat.
And speaking of bad news, illegal red soil mining is threatening the Kadavur Slender Loris Sanctuary.
Now we head up to the Himalayas, and a new study finds that Arunachal Pradesh has lost 110 glaciers in just 32 years.
We're not saying that the ice is melting fast, but if you're planning on doing a glacier trek, you might want to do it like yesterday.
Meanwhile, in another edition of Why God, Why Are We Like This? 16 years after the Forest Rights Act was passed, only 3 states have properly recognized community forest resource rights.
Oh, and also, a third of the world's biggest food companies are silent on the risks of synthetic fertilizers. Because acknowledging a problem means you have to do something about it.
And finally, in the US, insects and disease have turned 22.8 million acres of Colorado's forests into carbon sources instead of carbon sinks. So basically, the trees have gone from air purifiers to smoke machines. Anyway, that's it for today's headlines. If you found this unsettling, well, congratulations. At least you were paying attention.
That hauntingly beautiful sound you just heard, that's the call of the Hoolock Gibbon, India's only ape. And today, we are going to talk about them, their forests, and unfortunately, as is tradition on this show, or rather in this world, the impending destruction of their homes.
All right. Cool it. Let's take this step by step before we spiral into an existential dread.
Fine. So, Hoolock Gibbons, one of our closest evolutionary cousins, are these magnificent creatures with a distinct vocalization that is carried across the forest canopy.
They are named after the Hoolong trees, which dominate the upper canopy of their forest home. And why are they named after a tree? Because these apes almost never touch the ground. Well, that's basically my feet on a Sunday. They are exclusively arboreal, which means their survival depends on these dense, unbroken forest canopies.
Hey, if you don't believe us, go check them out on YouTube. It's like watching an extreme version of Ooch Neech Ka Papra, but the ground is reserved only for the dinner.
They take their arboreal lifestyle very seriously. Hoolock gibbons rarely move between forest fragments. They may refuse to cross gaps even as small as 200 meters. Relatable because if my charger isn't within arm's reach, my phone's just gonna die.
Yeah, no, that's really not the same thing, but go on.
Well, on top of that, they are extremely picky eaters. So much so that if you took them to a buffet, they'd still complain that there's nothing to eat. You'll see why this matters later.
Sadly, their numbers are alarmingly low. Only about 125 individuals remain in the Hoolock Wildlife Sanctuary. While they are found across northeast India, their population has nosedived from an estimated 100,000 in 1980 to just 5,000 today, a staggering 90% decline in the last 3 decades. They are now listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List.
Before we get into the down and dirty, one interesting fact about these Hoolock gibbons is that they have a human-like partner selection process. They are family-centric, with each family comprising 5 to 6 members. They even choose mates from outside their families.
Aw, that's kind of sweet and kind of what I run away from. Anyway, talking about their home range, let's talk about the Hoolock Gibbon Sanctuary. Nestled in Jorhat in Upper Assam, within the close proximity of the Assam-Nagaland border.
Picture a dense forest. When you look around, there's nothing but towering trees and thick shrubs. Sunlight barely filters through the canopy, casting a magical glow. The air hums with distant bird calls, cicadas hidden in the camouflage, and maybe even a frog. Suddenly, there's movement. Magnificent Hoolock gibbons swing effortlessly, calling and playing. But they're not alone. The sanctuary teems with unique species, including India's only nocturnal primate, the Bengal slow loris.
Oh wow, how slow is it? I need to look this up.
Well, it's not running marathons anytime soon. Out of India's 15 primate species, 7 are found in this sanctuary.
And it's not just primates. Indian elephants, leopards, civets, wild boars, and countless squirrels also call this place home.
Not to mention over 219 bird species, 200 butterfly species, and a staggering variety of reptiles, amphibians, and insects are found here. It's basically the Met Gala of the wild, where all the biggest animal celebrities show up, dressed in their finest fur, feathers, and scales. No RSVP needed.
This 20.98 square kilometer sanctuary is a critical refuge for biodiversity, providing crucial forest corridors that connect the Desoi Valley Reserve Forest to habitats in Nagaland. The landscape is part of a larger 264 square kilometer eco-sensitive zone which requires special protection.
But the truth is that this very sensitive zone has been facing many threats. We will come to the threat of the century soon, but let's begin with what has been happening up until now.
The sanctuary is supposed to be protected, but habitat fragmentation is an ongoing crisis. Encroachment, tea gardens, human settlements, and even illegal wildlife trafficking threaten its delicate balance. But the biggest culprit? A railway line laid in 1887 that passes through the sanctuary. The railway line, a vital link to Upper Assam, was upgraded to broad gauge in 1996 and sees around 40 trains daily.
The construction of the railway tracks bifurcated the sanctuary, isolating the Hoolock gibbon populations into two sections for the past 132 years. Gibbons, being the purest that they are, can't cross such gaps. So the split has disrupted communication between groups, leading to possible inbreeding depression. Some even call it a forest island. For these exclusively arboreal species, the restricted home range also limits their food options.
People have been demanding that the railway line be diverted, but guess what? Instead of moving it, authorities have decided to electrify the track. And let me tell you, conservationists and anyone who gives a damn about wildlife are not happy. Can a declining population of an already isolated species survive this?
And now coming to the cherry on top of the cake. Listen to this. Center clears oil and gas exploratory drilling in Assam's Hoolock Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary. Exactly. So, the National Board for Wildlife has greenlit exploratory oil and gas drilling in Assam's Hollongapar Gibbon Wildlife Sanctuary, involving a 4.4-hectare project which includes a well pad and access road located 13 kilometers away from the sanctuary. And all of this, by the way, falls within the designated eco-sensitive zone.
The proposed oil exploration project, valued at Rs 264 crore, is led by Kane Oil and Gas, a subsidiary of the Vedanta Group. Listeners, did you catch something? These guys are hell bent on calling this exercise an exploratory one. And this makes me question two things. One, why explore for oil if you don't plan on extracting it? And two, is this exploration gonna do any damage? Or is it, chill?
So, well, the NBWL has also explicitly banned oil or gas extraction within the eco sensitive zone. But you are right. Why spend 264 crores to know if oil exists underground? Definitely sounds shady. And this isn't the first time an eco sensitive zone has been abruptly altered to make way for development projects. This pattern runs deep, and we are just getting started. Stay tuned for more in upcoming episodes.
While the NBWL has imposed strict conditions such as real time monitoring, minimal tree felling, and pollution control, environmentalists remain opposed to the project. They argue that the area has been an elephant migration route since the Ahom kingdom and warn that the project will definitely escalate human elephant conflict. Instead of preventing these conflicts, however, the department plans to mitigate them through allocated funds.
Yes, because elephants famously accept bribes. Sure, just throw away money at the problem instead of actually preventing it.
Concerns are also being raised about the broader impact of such projects, as deep drilling often brings contaminants like heavy metals to the surface, and improper disposal can pollute surface and groundwater sources.
The noise and light pollution from round the clock operations would also further disrupt wildlife.
Kane Oil and Gas claims to be an environmentally conscious company, yet hydrocarbon extraction remains inherently destructive. The real question is, can the Hoolock gibbon and countless other species in the Hollongapar sanctuary survive the threats inherent to such intrusions?
A critical caveat is that under the Environment Impact Assessment Notification of 2006, offshore and onshore oil and gas exploration are categorized as B2 projects, which means that they bypass environmental impact assessments and public consultations altogether.
However, if public consultation was required, one event would undoubtedly dominate the discussion: the Bagjan blowout, caused by an explosion in a natural gas well. This catastrophic explosion and fire raged for over 5 months in 2020, causing an estimated 55% biodiversity loss in Assam's Tinsukia district. The incident stands as a grim testament to the devastation such projects can unleash.
And yet, the push for extraction continues. Vedanta's subsidiary, K and Oil Gas, has identified 35 locations for exploratory drilling, aligning with the Indian government's ambition to turn the Northeast into a hydrocarbon hub by 2030. A senior ministry official even emphasized that exploratory drilling is a gateway to full scale commercial extraction.
In a world already reeling with climate change, habitat loss, and rapid biodiversity decline, India's pledge to protect 30% of its land and seas by 2030 feels hollow when weighed against this relentless push to convert fragile, inhabited ecosystems into energy producing industries. How can we justify the destruction of critical habitats for short term economic gain when we are supposed to be prioritizing environmental conservation?
And if we are to entertain the argument of economic benefits, the real question remains: who truly stands to gain from such exploitation? More often than not, local communities whose lives are deeply connected to these ecosystems bear the brunt of the fallout, while distant corporate interests reap the rewards, leaving behind irreparable damage.
As if this wasn't messy enough, let me tell you something else. This land itself is disputed between Assam and Nagaland. Assam approved the project, but Nagaland argues that it isn't Assam's land to profit from.
That's right. This land has been disputed by the two states for the last 60 years, with no resolution in sight, kind of like the inheritance squabble in your family that started before you were born and will probably outlive you.
However, according to Article 371A of the Constitution, the land belongs to the tribes and not the state government.
The opposition to oil extraction isn't new. Back in the 70s, ONGC tried to set up oil fields in Changpang, near the Assam Nagaland border, but were forced to leave in 1994 due to resistance from the National Socialist Council of Nagalim, who argued that the benefits wouldn't reach the local community.
And in the midst of all of this, let's not forget that these spaces are occupied, lived in for centuries. Hoolock Gibbons aren't just sacred to conservationists, they hold deep cultural significance.
In several villages where Western Hoolock Gibbons reside, the mornings come alive with a rhythmic chorus of whoops, hoots, and escalating tones.
Around 22,000 villagers from the Moran community consider Hoolock Gibbons as their family members. The villagers organize rituals to observe various occasions of the animals' lives, including their births and deaths. PM Modi himself in the 113th edition of Man Ki Baat spoke about this.
असम में तिनसुकिया जिले के एक छोटे से गांव बारेकुरी में मोरान समुदाय के लोग रहते हैं और इसी गांव में रहते हैं हुलॉक गिबन, जिन्हें यहाँ होलो बंदर कहा जाता है। हुलॉक गिबन्स ने इस गांव में ही अपना बसेरा बना लिया है। आपको जानकर आश्चर्य होगा, इस गांव के लोगों का हुलॉक गिबन के साथ बहुत गहरा संबंध है।
Many traditions and myths are associated with this lived experience. For instance, in Barekuri, people believe it to be a bad omen to see the Hoolock Gibbon walking on the ground. That's why they think twice before cutting a tree, as it might be someone's home.
Some other tribes believe that killing Hoolock Gibbons is like killing someone from your own family.
These are the same people who have shared deep relationships with the landscape's creatures and have endured disasters like the Bagshan blowout and the massive Dibrugarh fire of 2005. Yet, they weren't even consulted before the recent drilling projects began. The only ones informed were those whose lands were acquired. Everyone else was just simply left to deal with the fallout.
So it's clear that to protect the gibbons and the sanctuary also means to protect a way of life.
The voice of dissent, albeit small, is ringing loud in Assam. The Brihatar Jorhat District Citizen Society, a civic organization, has been constantly protesting against the exploration project.
The latest to stage a protest over this issue is the Krishak Mukti Sangram Samiti, a farmers' organization demanding the withdrawal of the centre's in-principle approval for these drilling activities. Hoolock gibbons are not just separated by railway tracks, but by greed, politics, and bad decisions.
Our constitution recognizes the importance of such landscapes, designating eco-sensitive zones under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 to serve as buffer zones or shock absorbers between human habitation and protected areas.
Meanwhile, researchers and conservationists continue their work on grassroots initiatives, drawing from deep local knowledge to protect these primates. Yet, the corporate capture of environmental governance and the relentless prioritization of extractive industries in the name of development leave us asking, how long before the song of the Hoolock gibbon fades into silence? That's all for today, folks. If you'd like to check out more of our work, head over to our Instagram and other social media.
If you have any queries or comments, please reach out to us at environmentalbreakdown2099@gmail.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Environmental Breakdown.
We'll be back in a fortnight with more stories. Because why stress alone when we can freak out together?